All right. Well, welcome everybody. This is Aaron and Sarah, and we are doing our Sunday follow up. And Sunday we had a message about heaven. It was All Saints Sunday, which is always kind of it's actually kind of a rough Sunday, but it's, as I said, it's kind of a bittersweet Sunday because it's a Sunday we remember that there are those who we loved who have gone on before, but it's so there's a bitterness in that we miss and we grieve them. And we said if you've ever lost someone, you will always grieve them. But it's also a sweet Sunday in the sense that we remember there is a family reunion coming. So we got a handful of questions that we want to talk about tonight. And this is my beautiful wife, Sarah, who always helps us out and provides great insight. So go ahead.
All right. First question is, why didn't Jesus say more about heaven? You mentioned he's the creator of it and the creator of us, and he really could have told us all about it. Why do you think he did not choose to do so?
Yeah, this is one of those things that's just kind of a little frustrating at times because he's the only one that could have said, hey, let me tell you what it's about. And let me tell you what dying's really going to be like. And let me tell you what everlasting life's going to be like. And in one sense, he did give us a lot of information. If you take the book of Revelation and you take some passages out of Daniel and you take some droplets, if you will, from Paul about what heaven's going to be like. So there's enough information there that we can put together, hey, this is a general concept. My guess is that it's something unexplainable. When Paul speaks of it, he speaks of we're looking through like a stained glass window, trying to look on the other side. So for Jesus to begin to explain heavenly things, it's like, hey, I'm going to talk in a language that even if I spoke it as clear and plain as possible, you couldn't understand it. Even if I painted the clearest picture of it, you couldn't really see it. So I don't think Jesus was too excited about trying to tell us something we couldn't understand. Instead, what Jesus was always concerned about was how we get there.
Very good. You also mentioned that heaven is a place of perfection and that hell is the quarantine, a word we know well, quarantine of evil. Can you elaborate on that some?
Yeah, this is huge. We spent some time with our youth last night, and one of the questions we asked them was, is hell fair?
What'd they say? I'm not answering that.
I was seeing if you'd take the bait a little bit. It was interesting because this is what we get from people a lot. Now, they ask it in many different ways, like how can your God send someone to hell? If hell exists, then I don't want to believe in God. If hell's real, then your God's not loving.
Or I believe in heaven, but I don't believe in hell.
Right. And so we get this question a lot and in many different ways. So it's so important for us to be able to speak to this as Christians and to defend the concept of heaven and hell because Jesus talked about it. So clearly Jesus believed in hell. And you want to take the line?
If anyone can predict his own death and resurrection and pull it off, we should do whatever he says.
There you go. So here's the concept behind this, is hell fair? Well, the answer to that is absolutely. But heaven is not.
Ah, I see what you did there.
Yeah. Not really that tricky, but... and the idea is that we all deserve hell because hell is where evil exists. It's where evil goes. And so what we're all deserving is hell. And through the grace of God, which is a gift to us, a gift of grace, a gift of mercy, we can have access to heaven. So hell is fair. Heaven is not. Heaven is where we receive the unmerited, unearned gift of grace. And by the grace of God, we are given access to heaven. Now, again, the piece there that's helpful to remember is God doesn't send anyone to hell. And I say this over and over again, and some of you are probably like, okay, I've got this. Well, just like our phrase we used a minute ago, this is one of those I don't want to say enough that you own. That the minute someone speaks to you and asks you a question, you can go, hey, look, our God doesn't send anyone to hell. He just doesn't force anyone who doesn't want to be with him for eternity. That's not love at all. And so when we think of God and we think of hell, God says, look, if you don't want to be with me, you can be in the place where I'm not. and that's hell, which is where, ironically, the COVID culture and crisis has given us the access to the word that we used to use but didn't really have as much meaning, but the idea that hell is where evil's quarantined. Because you can't think of heaven without thinking of a place that's perfection. I was just talking to someone last night with the youth group, and they said, heaven is going to be where everything is perfect, and I'm finally free to absolutely just relax and be me. And I listened to them describe what heaven was, and they were describing a place of perfection. Why? Because none of us think of heaven and think of all the evils and disasters and struggles that we have here on earth. Well, if we're going to have a place where those aren't there, there has to be a place where evil is quarantined. Or else heaven is just the evolution of where we are now. And so hell is where evil's quarantined, and those who are evil, who have not been transformed by the grace of God, they reside in hell, the place where it's quarantined. So heaven and hell are separated, and hell only exists because heaven exists. And hell is the quarantine of evil, where God doesn't send people, but if you don't want to be with him, he doesn't force you to be with him.
When I think of heaven, I think of anywhere where you are.
Mm-hmm. Nobody is buying that at all.
You also talked about yesterday that talking about heaven is an additional indication that not all religions are the same. Why are you looking at me like that?
Well, you're just so beautiful. I can't take
thanks. My eyes. No one's buying that. Actually, that's true. You do think that. How does the conversation about heaven mean not all religions are the same?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this may surprise you, and it's always one of those things that kind of baffles me. Not every religion has heaven. Like the Hindu religion has this idea of reincarnation until we arrive at a certain state of, if you will, goodness, at which point in time we transcend the earth. But it doesn't have an idea of heaven as you and I know it. In the Buddhist religion, we eventually, again, attain by our own works, again, by our goodness, we get to return to the, if you will, energy source. And again, Hinduism and Buddhism, remember, Buddhism is an offshoot of Hinduism, so there's a lot of similarities there, which is also why people have trouble figuring out what's the differences. But and so there's this energy source that you return to, and ultimately we are returning to kind of the divine energy. And you hear this a lot in common language, even by people who are in the church, like, hey, don't mess with my chi, right? And they're really stealing like Hindu and Buddhist religious terms. Whether they know it and mean it that way or not is a question. But this idea that you and I put in and out good energy and bad energy and everything's energy, and there's some scientific concepts behind that validate a piece of that, but we're always more than just energy. We're always more than just energy. And so, again, the Buddhism and Hinduism don't even have an idea of heaven. So if we're going to talk about heaven, immediately we've said, well, then Buddhism and Hinduism is off the table. Which, again, there's all kinds of other problems with those worldviews anyways. And if you want to study them, it won't take long for you to begin to see them. And then, of course, you have Mormonism, which you and I actually are gods. How do you feel about that?
I really don't want that pressure.
Well, we transcend after we die, and there's like levels of heaven, and we become gods. And I don't know if you knew this, in Mormonism, God actually had children with his wife in heaven.
I didn't know that.
So it's kind of a bizarre religion. Again, Jesus didn't speak about any of this and didn't reveal any of this, but he revealed it to the prophets who have now explained it to us. But it gets really bizarre in a hurry, and you and I will become gods, according to Mormonism. Now, there's no historical credibility to this, but that's the belief in Mormonism. Of course, in Islam, you have to earn your way to heaven by making Allah happy. And what we've done is we've just taken every major world religion, and one of the key concepts I want you to see there is that you have to earn your way in all those. You have to be good enough. Then we get to Christianity, where again I told you Jesus was more concerned about how we get to heaven than he was about describing heaven. And Jesus says you can't do it on your own. It's a gift of grace. Now, again, all those begin to separate every religion. they can't all be the same because every one of them has a different endpoint. This is why Ravi Zacharias says every worldview must describe your origin, your meaning, your morality, and your destiny. And he said those four things have to be spoken of, and every worldview has to tell you about your meaning, your origin, your morality, and your destiny. And if a worldview can't give you a rational, logical explanation for those four pieces of life, then why trust it at all? And the reality of it is only the Christian worldview is the only worldview that can speak to all four of those core concepts, that has a rational and logical basis to it at all.
I liked one thing I saw that you had in the bulletin yesterday was, because I actually read that sometimes.
She reads it and edits it after I printed it.
I mean, was that all religions or all worldviews can be wrong, but they can't all be right, because you do hear people say from time to time, well, I think, there's some truth in all of them, and but I really liked that statement. Even if you believe Christianity's wrong, they can all be wrong, but they can't all be right.
Right.
Well, that was good.
And you're absolutely correct that there is some truth in almost all the religions. Like, that's how they deceive you, right? I mean, if it was such an obvious lie, we'd all go, well, that's not true. And our history is full of religions that we were pretty, like, hey, that can't be true. But the ones that still exist are still deceiving people because they do have half truths in them. And so that's what makes a great lie a great lie.
Last question. Are you ready?
Oh boy.
Okay. So
how about you take this? I'll ask it.
I don't really think I can.
Okay.
I can make something up.
All right.
So you have been with a lot of people at the end of their lives, loved ones of people who are passing. What do you say to someone that's kind of at that threshold, facing death?
Yeah. So I have had the opportunity to be with a lot of people as they're passing away, and with a lot of families as they're preparing for that, even years and months beforehand, if you will. Sometimes it's a case of dementia, sometimes it's a case of cancer that is a slow progression, and so the end's coming, and it's a long way off, but when you suddenly have kind of this, hey, I've got a couple years to live, 1 or 2 years, suddenly every day has a different value to it. And so you begin to think and prepare for that different. And then there are other more, if you will, difficult situations where there's a tragedy, a car wreck or a sudden heart attack, and someone passes away immediately. So those are two different situations that give you different opportunities to speak to the family differently. Let me give you a handful of things that I think are important. First of all, let me start with, what would you say to someone if they said, hey, I just got news that I'm dying today? I would just listen. And this is huge, because I think when we work with people, often we spend too much time talking and trying to give them answers without caring for them first. And this, I mean, this from any type of tragedy or hurt that you've gone through too. You don't need friends to come and talk to you. You need friends that will come and sit with you and cry with you. So I would say to you, if your family member or friend is dealing with that right now, I would say to you, just go and be with them. And sometimes they don't even want to talk to you. They just want you there. And again, that's true no matter what kind of loss you're going through. Just be with them, remind them that you care, pester them, if you will. Just because we have a tendency as humans to crawl back into our own isolation, and that's where we want to be, and then it begins to get all gloomy and woe is me.
We feel alone, forgotten, neglected, abandoned.
And we need the community to surround us and remind us that we're not alone. And in fact, not only are we not alone, but we need the community to speak into our lives the truth of God, that you're still loved, you're still valued, you're still beautiful and sacred, even though you're facing this difficult moment and this difficult news. So that would be what I would recommend, and that's what I often do if I know, hey, I'm going to go be with someone who's just got news that the end is coming. Just let them vent, and as a pastor, I often they get angry at me. because I become God to them. I'm the pathway to God, and they want to know why He's done this. They want to know what they did wrong, and they begin to speak to me. When I was younger, I was kind of taken off guard by this, but now I'm like, all right, that may be just what happens, and I just be calm and let them be angry because, again, God can handle it.
And there's a lot. I think that's a gift to people to tell them it's okay to be angry with God.
Absolutely. Yeah. You feel like you got robbed of time.
Like you have to be reverent at all times, but He's also our daddy and wants us to be authentic. He knows how we feel anyway.
Right.
Like, we're not going to deceive Him. I'm not really mad, God. So I think that's a big gift to give people permission to feel that.
And one of the blessings of who I am is most people can be real with me at all times, so they don't even feel like they got to go through that. Well, I'm going to pretend I'm not mad, and then I'm going to take it out on you. They just start out going, I'm mad at you and God. Okay, this is going to be a great evening. So again, just be there to be a listening post and remind someone that they're cared for. The same thing with the family. Often a family who is dealing with it. I would say then, with any kind of grief, remember that we're all going to take that differently. And so there's always in a room, there's always one talker, and that person talks and says silly things because, quite honestly, that's how they're handling the grief, and they're to the point where, like, every once in a while you gotta be like, hey, Judy, can you go outside or talk to somebody else on the phone for a while, because you're like, the rest of us aren't talking through our grief, and your need to just process is a little too much. But there's the talker, there's the person who's just going to be silent and take it all in. There's going to be someone who's going to be just, I need to do stuff, and they're going to be in the kitchen, they're going to be sweeping, they're going to be out washing windows in December because they just got to be doing something, and it's part of how they're showing that they love you, but it's part of how they're working through their grief. There's people who are going to just kind of shut down, if you will, and hibernate. They're gonna crawl into their bed, and like that, you may not see them for another 2 days, and they just are unable to function. And again, we got to call that person out of that because.
How long do you think? I'm sure it depends on the situation and the tragedy, but.
Well, are you making a joke here? Or?
No, like how long do you kind of let them be before you're like, all right, I'm throwing you in the shower. Let me help you.
Yeah, that's kind of person to person, but I mean, you don't want to let that go on very long at all, like a day, and then you start to say, all right, I'm not asking you not to grieve, but I'm asking you to develop some other skills to be healthy, which is why, again, the child raising and exposure to death, even at a young age, is really a good thing. When parents say, should I take my kid to a funeral, I always think, yes. And I'm always concerned because I run into a lot of people who are in their 40s, walking to the funeral home and like, this is the first time I've ever been around anybody or anyone who's died. I don't know what to do, and I'm thinking, okay. And what I often see is that because they haven't had those conversations as a family or those experiences, they lack some of the skills to handle that. And so, again, all that's helpful to develop as a child, and that's where even letting your kids see you grieve and how you grieve is very important, and go, all right, that's how mommy did it. They can go, I want to do it that way, or I don't want to be like mommy at all. Mommy started drinking. We haven't seen her since then. Well, I don't want to do it that way. So yeah, letting people see that and being exposed to death, I think is a good thing. It's part of life. It's part of the tragedy of our American culture, because we put old people in a nursing home, and then we don't see them till they're dead, and we don't grieve and see the circle of life like we used to. And so therefore we don't think about our own mortality like we once did. Which, again, when we begin to thinking about our own mortality, it pushes us to think about religious thoughts and about Jesus. And so right now we can ignore Jesus much longer than we used to be able to, because, again, family members would die and you would have a funeral in your house. You would have a wake in your house, and it would be 3 or 4 days where you might sit up with the dead or hang out with the dead. And again, everybody knew that was the end, and it was coming. So, what would I say to someone who said to me, hey, I just got news, I have several years, I've sat with them, I've listened to them, and now I get a chance because it's a couple weeks later. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, tell me about your relationship with Jesus. Do you have one? I might say, again, depending on what I know about them, I may walk in and know they don't believe in Jesus. I'm going to say, hey, what do you think about God? And when someone knows they're going to die, they're much more open to those conversations than before. So I've never found anybody who's like, I don't want to talk to you at all. What I found is people who, again, are waiting for me to ask the question, hey, what do you think about God? And this is important because often people's perspective and view of God is not the God of the Bible. And so it's a beautiful moment where I often get the chance to speak and correct a bent view of God. God's a mean old man because he let mom die, and he let mom die of dementia. No loving God would do that. And therefore, I'm not really buying into this God. And if that's what heaven's like, I don't want to be there again. So again, we get to speak to all those pieces. And it's often not just a pastor, but family and community around that get to say that. So the last thing I would say then is just remind them of the hope of heaven. Again, heaven's a place where God has redeemed and renewed all things. He makes everything new. And no matter what you've done in life, and again, this is the power of the gospel. This is that thief on the cross moment, that you may be going to Jesus at the last moment, at the deathbed, and saying, I don't deserve this. I haven't done anything to earn this. And it's like, yep, none of us have. You're just the one who gets it without. You're not going to mature in your faith. You're going to have to do all that in heaven. But you get to go to heaven too by simply putting your trust in Jesus. That's the beauty of the gospel, right? It's not a earned or works message. It is God died for you to save you from your sin.
I've heard people before say that doesn't seem fair. That I can try to live a godly life and straight and narrow, and somebody at the very last minute. And that always amuses me because life is so much more fulfilling walking close with Jesus. Yeah. I feel sorry for those people that do it at the last minute that are robbed of that opportunity here on earth.
And really, that's the story of the prodigal son and the older son. I mean, the older son who has lived with that, who's never been hungry, has had party after party probably thrown for him and that he's experienced. He has this, access to the entire family estate, and now he's upset about one little party that the younger son has, and the father, I read the story and I want to say, hey, the dad needs to smack him upside the head and wake him up because, hey, you've had access to everything the whole time. You've never had to know what it's like to be looking at what the pigs are eating and going, well, I want that. Right. And so, you're talking about the joy of knowing Jesus your entire life and knowing God your entire life, as well as what should be happening. And this is where the story of the prodigal son is so fascinating. The older son clearly has not matured spiritually and emotionally to the level of the father. And that's where it's important for the Christian church, individuals who know Jesus, to constantly be maturing in their faith. Because, again, there's no reason we should be jealous of someone at the last moment or go, oh, that's not fair. Right. We should go, gosh, I'm glad you're in, but you missed out on everything. Right. Hey, I'm sorry, but hey, glad you're part of the family. Yeah. You get to be here now. But
rejoicing, but
I don't know how you did it. Man, I barely made it with Jesus. I don't know how you did it at all.
That reminds me quickly, I wanted to ask, because I'm sure I already know the answer, but when you talk to families who are losing loved ones, do you see a difference between families who know Christ and the hope of heaven versus families who don't?
Yeah, great to point that out, because absolutely. In fact, I say to people, hey, if you want to see if Christianity's real, come with me and we'll sit down at a funeral for a family who knows Jesus. That's not that they're not sad.
Sure.
They're grieving. And again, if it was a tragic, no warning, they're in shock. And sometimes it's a child, and even Christians feel like that child was robbed of their years. And so it's not that any of that part changes. It's just that the Christian family goes, it's going to be okay. There's going to be a reunion. There's hope. The family that doesn't have Jesus, it is painful to watch, because you're looking at a group of people who have no hope, who are just stunned and have nothing to do and nowhere to go. And as a pastor, you're walking in, or as a friend, you might be walking in, and it's suffocating, the oppression that's in that room. And you want to say, hey, you don't have to buy into this lie of Satan. There is truth, there is hope. But at that moment, they're usually so overwhelmed that, again, it is just painful to be with those people. It's an honor because you get to walk with them and introduce them to the hope of Jesus. But yeah, there's a drastic difference if you want to see, hey, how does this spirituality lived out? And Paul would say that the Christian who has Jesus has the peace that passes understanding.
Absolutely.
The family over here of religion X or not Christianity is, I mean, they lived, they died. The end, there's no hope. And again, it grates against human nature. Like, none of us want to believe that. The good news is that Christianity isn't something that we just want to be true. It's true, and that's the reason we want it, because we want truth. God has designed us to seek out the truth. Good question.
Good answer.
No, thanks.
That's all I got.
That's all I got. So, hey, thanks for joining us, and we love your questions. We love your feedback, and in case you didn't know, this past Sunday we launched our second campus. So 2 locations, 1 church. We have a church service in Xenia that's at in Fairborn that's at 9:30. I should do them in the order they go.
That'd be helpful.
And then at Xenia at the YMCA at 11 o'clock. And wow, it was a lot of fun.
It was.
It was a lot of work getting there. So, but we had a great time, and we want to invite you to come out and join us at either of those campuses. And we have a children's program at both. We do have a youth group that still meets at the Fairborn location, but kids from Xenia can come there as well. And we're enjoying that. So,
Couple of plugs. Our youth group is really growing.
Oh my gosh, yes.
We're going to actually divide into 2
Right.
to be a little more age specific with our programs.
That's Sunday night at 6:30.
Yes, so they're a great group of kids, and like I said, it keeps growing. Also young adults. I don't know if you have a date yet for that next event, but
I do not.
coming up. Watch the website. But we do have a group for young adults, single, dating, married, just younger than us is really the requirement. And then what's the other? Oh, I just wanted to say, if you do know people in Xenia, that's something we're trying to build, kind of get the word out that we're there, and I think it's going to be a really good thing.
Yeah. So thanks for joining us, guys. Have a wonderful evening, and you can check out more information at www.faithignited.info. So, thanks, guys. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.